Redrawing the map of post-war Europe. The Yalta Conference. The Yalta Conference, held from February 4 to 11, 1945, was a crucial wartime summit between the leaders of the Allied powers, Joseph Stalin of the Soviet Union, Franklin D. Roosevelt of the United States, and Winston Churchill of the United Kingdom. Convened in the Crimean city of Yalta, this meeting aimed to address the pressing issues of the war's final stages and the post-war geopolitical landscape. The agreements and tensions that emerged at Yalta significantly shaped the contours of the post-war world and the onset of the Cold War. The backdrop of the Yalta Conference was defined by the imminent collapse of Nazi Germany. By early 1945, Allied forces were closing in on Germany from both the west and the east. The Soviet Red Army had advanced deep into Eastern Europe, capturing key territories, while American and British forces were making steady progress in Western Europe. With victory in Europe seemingly within reach, the Big Three convened at Yalta to coordinate their final military actions against Germany, and to discuss the reorganization of Europe, and the establishment of a new international order. One of the primary objectives of the Yalta Conference was to secure a coordinated strategy for the final assault on Germany and the division of its territory after surrender. The Allied leaders agreed that Germany would be divided into 4 occupation zones controlled by the United States, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and France. This arrangement aimed to ensure the demilitarization and denazification of Germany while preventing any single power from dominating its post-war reconstruction. The question of Poland's future proved to be one of the most contentious issues at Yalta. The Soviet Union had occupied much of Poland during its advance westward, and Stalin was determined to maintain a sphere of influence in the region. The Big Three reached a compromise. Poland's eastern border would be adjusted along the Curzon line, granting the Soviet Union significant territorial gains, while Poland would be compensated with lands taken from Germany in the west. Additionally, the Allies agreed to establish a provisional government in Poland that would include members of both the communist and non-communist factions, with the promise of free elections to determine its future. Another critical topic at Yalta was the establishment of the United Nations, a new international organization designed to promote peace and security. The leaders agreed on the basic structure of the United Nations, including the creation of the Security Council with permanent members and veto powers for the United States, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, China, and France. This decision reflected the Allies' commitment to multilateralism while acknowledging the realities of power politics. The Yalta Conference also addressed the question of war reparations and the fate of war criminals. The Allies agreed that Germany would be required to pay reparations for the destruction caused during the war, with a significant portion allocated to the Soviet Union. They also reaffirmed their commitment to prosecuting Nazi leaders for war crimes, setting the stage for the Nuremberg trials. In addition to European affairs, the conference dealt with the war in the Pacific. Roosevelt sought Soviet assistance in the war against Japan, recognizing that such involvement would expedite Japan's defeat and reduce American casualties. Stalin agreed to enter the war against Japan 3 months after Germany's surrender, in exchange for territorial concessions in East Asia, including the return of southern Sakhalin and the Kuril Islands. While the Yalta Conference achieved significant agreements, it also exposed deep-seated tensions among the Allies. The differing visions of the post-war order held by the Western powers and the Soviet Union foreshadowed the ideological and geopolitical conflicts of the Cold War. Stalin's insistence on securing a sphere of influence in Eastern Europe, combined with the Western leaders' reluctance to directly challenge Soviet ambitions, created a framework for the division of Europe into Eastern and Western blocs. The legacy of the Yalta Conference is both profound and complex. On the one hand, it represented a remarkable instance of cooperation among the Allied powers in the pursuit of common goals. The agreements reached at Yalta facilitated the successful conclusion of the Second World War and laid the groundwork for the post-war reconstruction of Europe. On the other hand, the compromises made at Yalta, particularly regarding Eastern Europe, have been criticized for enabling Soviet domination of the region and contributing to the division of Europe. In retrospect, the Yalta Conference exemplifies the interplay of diplomacy, strategy, and realpolitik in shaping the course of history. It underscores the challenges of reconciling differing interests and ideologies in the pursuit of peace and stability. The decisions made at Yalta continue to resonate in contemporary discussions about international relations, sovereignty, and the balance of power. As a defining moment of the Second World War and its aftermath, the Yalta Conference remains a testament to both the possibilities and limitations of global cooperation. The last stand in the Philippines. The Battle of Manila. The Battle of Manila, fought between February 3 and March 3, 1945, was one of the most intense and devastating urban battles of the Second World War. As part of the Allied campaign to liberate the Philippines, the battle marked the culmination of General Douglas MacArthur's promise to return after his forced departure in 1942. While the Allied forces successfully reclaimed Manila from the Japanese, the conflict left the city in ruins and resulted in significant civilian casualties. The battle's scale and brutality underscored the tragic costs of urban warfare and the broader conflict in the Pacific theater. Manila, the capital of the Philippines, held immense strategic and symbolic significance for both the Allies and the Japanese. For the Allies, it represented a key step toward reclaiming the Philippines, cutting Japanese lines of communication and supply, and securing a foothold for further operations in Southeast Asia. For the Japanese, Manila was both a critical defensive position and a symbol of their occupation, having held control of the city since 1942. The city's liberation was pivotal to the broader Allied effort to dismantle Japanese power in the Pacific. The battle began on February 3, 1945, when elements of the U.S. Sixth Army entered the outskirts of Manila. Their initial approach encountered relatively light resistance, as Japanese forces under General Tomoyuki Yamashita had concentrated their defenses in the northern and central parts of the city. Yamashita, recognizing the strategic untenability of defending Manila against superior Allied forces, had ordered his troops to withdraw to the mountains of northern Luzon. However, Rear Admiral Sanji Iwabuchi, in defiance of Yamashita's orders, chose to fortify and defend Manila with a contingent of Japanese Marines and naval troops. Iwabuchi's decision to hold Manila transformed the battle into a protracted and brutal struggle. The Japanese forces, numbering approximately 16,000, adopted a strategy of fortified resistance, turning the city's buildings, including schools, churches, and hospitals, into defensive strongholds. Mines, barricades, and booby traps were extensively deployed, and Japanese troops engaged in scorched earth tactics and widespread atrocities against civilians. The U.S. forces, which included the 1st Cavalry Division, the 37th Infantry Division, and Filipino guerrilla units, faced the formidable task of clearing the city street by street. Urban warfare posed unique challenges, with narrow streets, dense structures, and fortified positions creating a highly dangerous environment. The Allied forces relied on artillery, air support, and close-quarters combat to dislodge the entrenched Japanese defenders. One of the most harrowing aspects of the Battle of Manila was the suffering inflicted on the civilian population. The Japanese forces carried out mass executions, rapes, and other atrocities against Filipino civilians, resulting in the deaths of tens of thousands. The U.S. bombardment of Japanese positions, while essential to the Allied victory, also contributed to civilian casualties and the destruction of much of the city's infrastructure. By the time the battle ended on March 3, 1945, Manila was in ruins, with an estimated 100,000 civilian deaths and significant damage to cultural and historical landmarks. The fall of Manila marked a significant Allied victory, with the Japanese defenders annihilated and the city returned to Filipino and American control. However, the cost of the battle was immense. The destruction of Manila's infrastructure and cultural heritage would have long-lasting effects on the city's recovery and development. The scale of civilian suffering highlighted the devastating human cost of the Second World War, particularly in the context of urban warfare. The Battle of Manila had far-reaching implications for the Allied campaign in the Pacific. It disrupted Japanese communication and supply lines, bolstered Filipino resistance, and set the stage for subsequent Allied operations against Japan. It also reaffirmed General MacArthur's leadership and his commitment to liberating the Philippines, fulfilling a promise that held deep symbolic and emotional significance for both Americans and Filipinos. In retrospect, the Battle of Manila serves as a stark reminder of the complexities and costs of urban warfare. It underscores the profound impact of military strategy and decision-making on civilian populations and highlights the enduring consequences of war on cities and their inhabitants. As one of the defining battles of the Pacific theater, it remains a powerful testament to the resilience of the Filipino people and the sacrifices made in the pursuit of freedom and liberation. The flames of war. The bombings of Dresden and Tokyo. The bombing campaigns of the Second World War represented some of the most controversial and devastating strategies of modern warfare. Among these, the firebombing of Tokyo and the bombing of Dresden stand out not only for their unprecedented destruction but also for the ethical debates they have sparked over the years. These campaigns underscored the total war doctrine, where civilian and military targets were intertwined in the pursuit of victory. The immense loss of life, cultural heritage, and infrastructure in these two cities serves as a stark reminder of the human cost of war and the ethical dilemmas of targeting civilian populations. The firebombing of Tokyo, conducted primarily by the United States, was part of a broader strategy to weaken Japan's ability to continue the war. On the night of March the 9th to the 10th, 1945, over 300 B-29 Superfortress bombers dropped incendiary bombs on Tokyo, deliberately targeting densely populated residential areas. The result was a conflagration of unimaginable proportions. The wooden structures that dominated Tokyo's architecture fueled the fires, creating a firestorm that consumed 16 square miles of the city. Estimates of the death toll range from 80,000 to 100,000, making it one of the deadliest air raids in history. Over 1 million people were left homeless, and much of the city's infrastructure was destroyed. The rationale behind the firebombing campaign was to cripple Japan's industrial capacity and demoralize its civilian population. The United States believed that by targeting urban centers, they could hasten Japan's surrender and avoid a costly ground invasion. However, the firebombing of Tokyo also raised profound ethical questions. Critics argued that the deliberate targeting of civilians violated principles of proportionality and necessity in warfare. The raid on Tokyo, along with subsequent firebombing campaigns in other Japanese cities, exemplified the shift toward total war, where the distinction between combatants and civilians was increasingly blurred. Half a world away, the bombing of Dresden in February 1945 by British and American forces became another symbol of the destructiveness and ethical controversies of aerial warfare. Dresden, known for its cultural and architectural heritage, was targeted in a series of raids from February 13 to 15, 1945. The city was engulfed in a firestorm similar to Tokyo's, destroying large swathes of its historic center. Estimates of the death toll vary widely, with figures ranging from 25,000 to 35,000. The destruction of Dresden sparked significant debate over its necessity, as the war in Europe was nearing its conclusion, and Germany's defeat appeared inevitable. The bombing of Dresden was justified by the Allies on strategic grounds. The city was a major transportation hub and housed important military and industrial facilities. However, critics have argued that the scale of the bombing and the deliberate targeting of civilians made it an act of retribution rather than a purely military operation. The devastation of Dresden highlighted the tensions between military necessity and ethical considerations in the conduct of war. The firebombing of Tokyo and the bombing of Dresden shared common features, including the use of incendiary bombs, the targeting of civilian populations, and the immense loss of life and cultural heritage. Both campaigns demonstrated the effectiveness of strategic bombing in achieving military objectives but also exposed the human and ethical costs of such strategies. The deliberate targeting of civilians in these campaigns has been widely criticized as a violation of the laws of war and has fueled ongoing debates about the morality of aerial bombing in modern warfare. The aftermath of these bombings had profound implications for the post-war world. In Tokyo, the destruction accelerated Japan's collapse, contributing to the eventual decision to use atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In Dresden, the bombing became a symbol of the suffering inflicted on Germany during the war and has been a focal point for debates about the morality of the Allied bombing campaign. Both events underscore the need for a careful balance between military objectives and humanitarian considerations in the conduct of war. Island of Fire. Iwo Jima? The Battle of Iwo Jima, fought between February 19 and March 26, 1945, was one of the most intense and significant battles in the Pacific Theater during the Second World War. This battle showcased the determination and sacrifice of American and Japanese forces, becoming a symbol of the war's brutality and the strategic importance of the island. With its iconic moments, including the raising of the American flag on Mount Suribachi, Iwo Jima remains a profound example of the human cost of war. Iwo Jima, a small volcanic island situated roughly halfway between Japan and the Mariana Islands, held immense strategic value for both the United States and Japan. For the United States, capturing Iwo Jima would provide a base for fighter escorts and an emergency landing site for bombers conducting air raids on mainland Japan. For the Japanese, the island was a critical outpost in their defense network, serving as a warning station and a shield for the home islands. By early 1945, the Allied forces had gained significant momentum in the Pacific, and the capture of Iwo Jima became a priority in their strategy to bring the war closer to Japan. The Japanese, under the command of Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, were determined to defend the island to the last man. They constructed a complex network of fortifications, tunnels, and caves, turning the island into a formidable fortress. The battle began on February 19, 1945, with a massive naval and aerial bombardment by US forces, followed by the landing of the 5th Marine Amphibious Corps. The initial landings faced intense resistance as Japanese forces, entrenched in their defensive positions, unleashed a barrage of artillery, machine gun fire, and mortars. The US Marines encountered harsh conditions, including rough terrain, black volcanic ash that made movement difficult, and relentless enemy fire. One of the most iconic moments of the battle occurred on February 23, when Marines raised the American flag on Mount Suribachi, the highest point on the island. This event, captured in a photograph by Joe Rosenthal, became a symbol of American perseverance and victory. However, the flag raising marked only the early stages of the battle, which would continue for several more weeks. The fighting on Iwo Jima was characterized by brutal close-quarters combat, and significant casualties on both sides. The Japanese employed a strategy of attrition, seeking to inflict maximum damage on the advancing American forces. They launched counterattacks, staged banzai charges, and utilized their elaborate tunnel system to conduct surprise assaults. The US forces, relying on superior numbers and firepower, gradually advanced, clearing bunkers and caves in grueling combat. The human cost of the battle was staggering. Approximately 70,000 US Marines and sailors participated in the operation, suffering over 26,000 casualties, including nearly 7,000 killed. The Japanese garrison, numbering around 21,000, fought with remarkable tenacity, with nearly all of them killed in action or by suicide to avoid capture. Only a few hundred Japanese soldiers were taken prisoner. The capture of Iwo Jima had significant strategic and symbolic implications. The island provided a critical base for American operations, including the emergency landing of over 2,400 B-29 bombers during subsequent air raids on Japan. The battle also underscored the challenges of amphibious assaults and the determination of the Japanese military, foreshadowing the even bloodier battles to come, such as the Battle of Okinawa. In the broader context of the Second World War, the Battle of Iwo Jima exemplified the escalating intensity and human cost of the Pacific campaign. It highlighted the importance of strategy, logistics, and the willingness of soldiers on both sides to endure unimaginable hardships in pursuit of their objectives. The battle also raised questions about the necessity and proportionality of such costly engagements, particularly in light of the war's impending conclusion. The legacy of the Battle of Iwo Jima endures as a testament to the sacrifices of those who fought. It serves as a reminder of the courage and resilience displayed by the Marines and the tragic loss of life that defined the Pacific War. The island, now a symbol of both American heroism and Japanese resolve, stands as a poignant reminder of the cost of war and the importance of striving for peace. Nazi Germany's last stand. The Battle of Berlin. The Battle of Berlin, fought between April 16 and May 2, 1945, marked the climactic final chapter of the Second World War in Europe. As the Soviet Red Army advanced toward the German capital, Adolf Hitler's Third Reich faced its inevitable collapse. This fierce and bloody battle was pivotal in ending Nazi Germany's reign and reshaping the political landscape of Europe. By early 1945, the Allies had gained significant ground against Germany, with the Soviets pressing westward after victories in Eastern Europe, and the Western Allies advancing from the west. Berlin, as the symbolic and administrative heart of Nazi Germany, became the focus of the Soviet offensive. The operation to capture Berlin involved more than 2.5 million Soviet troops under the command of Marshal Georgy Zhukov and Marshal Ivan Konev, along with massive amounts of artillery, tanks, and aircraft. The Soviet assault began on April 16, 1945, with the Battle of the Seelow Heights, located east of Berlin. The Seelow Heights were heavily fortified and served as the last significant defensive line before the city. The Soviet forces launched a massive artillery barrage, followed by waves of infantry and tank assaults. Despite fierce resistance from German defenders, who were outnumbered and outgunned, the Soviets eventually breached the defenses after several days of intense fighting. Once the Seelow Heights fell, Soviet forces advanced rapidly toward Berlin, encircling the city by April 25. The German defenders, including remnants of the Wehrmacht, SS units, and the Volkssturm, a militia composed of older men and young boys, were vastly outnumbered. Despite their dire situation, they fought with desperation, using urban guerrilla tactics to slow the Soviet advance. Street by street and house by house combat characterized the battle, as Soviet troops encountered entrenched German positions, sniper fire, and booby traps. Inside Berlin, the situation was chaotic and grim. The city was heavily bombarded by Soviet artillery and airstrikes, reducing much of it to rubble. Civilians endured severe hardships, with limited access to food, water, and medical supplies. Many sought refuge in basements and bunkers, while others fled westward to escape the advancing Soviets. The brutal combat and widespread destruction underscored the human cost of war, as both civilians and soldiers bore the brunt of the conflict. One of the most iconic moments of the Battle of Berlin occurred on April 30, when Soviet troops raised their flag over the Reichstag, symbolizing the fall of Nazi Germany. That same day, Adolf Hitler committed suicide in his bunker beneath the Chancellery, along with Eva Braun, whom he had married hours earlier. His death signaled the collapse of the Nazi leadership and paved the way for Germany's unconditional surrender. On May 2, 1945, German forces in Berlin officially surrendered to the Soviets, bringing the battle to an end. The fall of Berlin was a decisive victory for the Soviet Union, and a pivotal moment in the Allied effort to defeat Germany. It marked the culmination of years of sacrifice and struggle by Allied forces and symbolized the triumph of the coalition over fascism. The consequences of the Battle of Berlin were profound. Militarily, it marked the end of the European theater of the Second World War, with Germany's unconditional surrender following shortly after on May 7. Politically, it set the stage for the division of Germany and Berlin into occupation zones controlled by the Soviet Union, the United States, the United Kingdom, and France. This division became a central feature of the Cold War, as the city became a focal point of ideological and geopolitical tensions between East and West. The human cost of the Battle of Berlin was staggering. The city's population suffered immense casualties, with an estimated 100,000 civilians killed and countless others wounded or displaced. The Soviet forces also endured significant losses, with over 80,000 killed and hundreds of thousands wounded. For the German defenders, the battle represented the final desperate act of a regime that had brought untold suffering to Europe. Operation Iceberg. The Allied invasion of Okinawa. The Battle of Okinawa, fought from April 1 to June 22, 1945, was the last major battle of the Pacific Theater during the Second World War and one of the bloodiest confrontations of the conflict. This campaign was marked by immense human cost, both in terms of military casualties and civilian suffering. As the Allies sought to secure Okinawa as a staging ground for a potential invasion of Japan, the battle highlighted the brutal nature of modern warfare and the determination of the Japanese defense. Okinawa, part of the Ryukyu Islands, held strategic importance for both the Allies and Japan. For the Allies, capturing Okinawa would provide a base for air operations and logistical support necessary for an invasion of Japan. For the Japanese, it was the last line of defense before the home islands. The battle's significance was underscored by its scale. Approximately 545,000 Allied personnel, primarily Americans, faced a Japanese force of 76,000, supplemented by thousands of Okinawan conscripts and local defenders. The battle began with an unprecedented naval bombardment, as Allied forces sought to weaken Japanese defenses before the amphibious landings. When U.S. troops landed on the beaches on April 1, they encountered little initial resistance, advancing rapidly inland. This early progress led some to believe that the campaign would be less grueling than anticipated. However, this calm was deceptive, as the Japanese had adopted a strategy of deep defense, retreating to fortified positions in the southern part of the island. The heart of the Japanese defense lay in the Shuri Line, a series of interconnected fortifications, caves, and tunnels that utilized Okinawa's rugged terrain to great effect. Here, the Japanese, under the command of Lieutenant General Mitsuru Yoshijima, employed a strategy of attritional warfare, aiming to inflict maximum casualties on the advancing Allied forces. The fighting around the Shuri Line was characterized by intense and often hand-to-hand combat, as American troops faced determined resistance from entrenched Japanese positions. One of the defining features of the Battle of Okinawa was the extensive use of kamikaze attacks by Japanese forces. These suicide missions targeted Allied ships, causing significant damage and loss of life. Over the course of the battle, more than 1,500 kamikaze pilots participated in these attacks, reflecting the desperation and resolve of the Japanese military. The battle's toll on civilians was catastrophic. Okinawa's civilian population, caught between the warring sides, suffered immensely. Japanese forces often conscripted civilians into labor or combat roles, while others were used as human shields. Many Okinawans died in the crossfire, from starvation, or by suicide, fearing retribution from American forces. The battle resulted in the deaths of an estimated 100,000 civilians, nearly a third of Okinawa's pre-war population. By late May, the Shuri Line had been breached, and organized Japanese resistance began to collapse. Despite this, isolated pockets of Japanese troops continued to fight until the formal end of the battle on June 22. General Yoshijima and his chief of staff, General Isamu Cho, committed ritual suicide rather than surrender, exemplifying the ethos of resistance that characterized the Japanese military during the war. The Battle of Okinawa was a Pyrrhic victory for the Allies. While they secured the island, the cost was staggering. The Allies suffered over 82,000 casualties, including more than 12,000 killed. The Japanese losses were even more severe, with nearly 110,000 troops killed and many more wounded or captured. The immense loss of life, and the destruction wrought by the battle underscored the challenges of an invasion of Japan, influencing the decision to use atomic bombs to force Japan's surrender. In the broader context of the Second World War, the Battle of Okinawa highlighted the ferocity and human cost of the Pacific Campaign. It demonstrated the effectiveness of entrenched defenses and the psychological impact of kamikaze attacks, shaping Allied strategies in the final months of the war. The battle also underscored the resilience and suffering of Okinawa's civilian population, whose experiences remain a poignant reminder of the war's impact on non-combatants. Today, the Battle of Okinawa stands as a testament to the courage and sacrifice of those who fought and endured its horrors. It serves as a sobering reminder of the devastation of war and the enduring importance of striving for peace. The lessons of Okinawa, both strategic and human, continue to resonate as historians and policymakers reflect on the legacy of the Second World War. In the next and final chapter, we will cover the liberation of Auschwitz, as well as the atomic bombings of Japan, and the unconditional surrender of the Axis powers. Please like and subscribe.